Uh, and, Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Chernevsky. I'm the host and producer of this podcast, Is Uncalled For. You may have noticed we are not doing live Fringe this year because of a COVID outbreak in this very house. I myself was not affected, but other people were. And that is why we could not do live Fringe this year. We'll see about next year. So in the meantime, you get us for Virtual Fringe for the third year in a row. And want to thank all my guests for agreeing to the transition from in-person to virtual. And thank you. I couldn't do this without you, and you guys rock. So without further ado, let's get into this episode. Hope you enjoy. Thank you.
Welcome to this podcast is Uncalled For.
Well, the name of this podcast is Stuff Uncalled For?
This podcast is Uncalled For.
Podcast, all right. Well,
what's uncalled for about it?
What we doing at Tijuana?
And you're like, what did you just say?
It's a bit of a slap in the face and an insult.
And then look, thank you back home.
Oh, that's going to be great for the football chant.
Yeah, it's kind of like, what's that character from Guardians of the Galaxy who takes everything literally?
Because it always happens. It always happens.
That is uncalled for, Michael.
And now, your host for this podcast, Mike Chernevsky.
Sorry about that. I had tech issues on top of, get these.
All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. And let's welcome Dan Handley to the podcast. Dan, how are you doing?
Not too bad. You?
I'm doing good, all things considered. We could have been on a stage, but my siblings, whom I live with, decided to get COVID at the exact wrong time. So here we are.
Yeah, just sometimes they be that way. They always pick the worst times.
Yeah.
They need to work around your schedule a little bit better.
A little bit. A little bit. So, of course, we're both involved with the IFC and both been in the film community for a while.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, you're primarily an actor, and help me out with what all you do in film.
Well, I've been a jack of most trades. I mean, I've done so much on both sides of camera. Typically, I'm an actor in front of the camera, but I've written, I've produced, I've directed, I've done boom mic, I've done composing, I've done editing, So it's like I say, jack of most trades.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same here, though I prefer behind the camera and writing. So writing, directing, camera work, all that good stuff, and on occasion editing. So what were some of the films that you worked on locally?
Oh, there's been quite a few, mostly smaller stuff. A lot of times for like the one night stand or for 48-hour film competition, things like that. A few years ago, I did direct a film that I also acted in. It was called Sleep Study, and it was kind of a Twilight Zone-esque ending type premise. And basically, the one who produced it. It was supposed to be for a collection of 4 short films. I think 2 or 3 got done. I'm not sure about the rest, but on the first one, he had a script. I was looking through it. He wanted me to play this one part, and I said, "All right, who's directing it?" He said, "Probably me." I said, "Well, I've got these visual things, these ideas that would work really well." And I started going down this. He's like, "You better direct." So yeah, we ended up working together quite a bit. He'd get locations and a lot of times people to be in it, whereas I kind of just I was the director. I called in Barrett Redmond as a director of photography, and things actually went a lot better than I thought it would. So things just kind of fell into place on that.
Cool. Cool. I believe you did Iron City Chronicles as well. Huh?
Yes, I did a little bit of it. We did one version of a short film. That ended up being kind of scratched, and they started again with a different premise. And I was supposed to have a bigger role, but I ended up just being like in one scene as a bodyguard for who was originally supposed to be senator, then was later like a businessman, or I don't know, maybe it was the other way around.
Yeah.
Jeff Jeff Staub was playing that part. But yeah, my when they went kind of a new direction, my part just kind of went,
Yeah.
into just this one little shot. But I did do a lot of work behind the scenes on it up to that point.
Yeah. I, of course, had Jason on this Virtual Fringe as well. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So, he's still very much working with the concepts and everything. So that's pretty cool. Yeah.
Well, when he's got that low of a budget and what he's got, he's really doing a good job of what I've seen so far. He's done a good job of adapting to the budget that he has, considering what his vision is, a very cyberpunk, Blade Runner type of thing. And so when you're trying to work with that low of a budget, it's not easy.
Yeah, tell me about it, Mr. Cyberpunk police procedural here. Yeah. So, you worked with Dave, right? Dave Barry.
Not directly. I've known him and seen his stuff. He's seen my stuff and that type of thing, but we never actually worked on it. Well, actually, there were two things that we worked on. One, he did did music post production, and the other thing was a music video that he directed. And I kind of did a little part in that. So yeah, I did work with him on one project directly and one project indirect. So
Cool. So I worked with Dave more than I did you. Than you did him. I'm sorry.
yeah,
I can't talk right now. Yeah. I'd make it points of bringing Dave up whenever I have a filmmaker on, just in case. They had the pleasure of working with him. And
yeah, I've seen his stuff, and the thing is, his stuff was okay. I thought it was okay. It just wasn't my style or anything. I wasn't as much a fan of his work, but I was a fan of his because of the influence that he had, the people who were influenced by him, and who he's encouraged and who became, great local filmmakers based off of his guidance. So the effect he's had on the local film community is going to last for years to come. Maybe indefinitely. So I mean, I can't say I was a fan of his work, but I was a fan of his.
Yeah, there are a couple of projects that one especially he asked me to do. I said absolutely not. That was the one. It was called Prey. Which involved, he wanted me to be the guy that was drugged to death, and then so I was like, absolutely not. Yes.
Yeah. He always had some wild ideas,
Yeah.
And I I think it wasn't this year, was the previous one after it was the first one night stand after they passed.
Sounds
There
pretty.
was a group that of people who normally worked with them, and they did one that was very much his style. And so I was like, that was an excellent tribute. That was a Dave Barry legacy team right there, and it worked so well in his style.
That's
It's
awesome.
perfect.
That's awesome. Too bad I was busy this year with other stuff. um, I'm pretty busy on Saturdays now, so yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
that happens.
Mm-hmm. So that's what I wanted to talk about was martial arts, because we're both influenced by the martial arts. I do recall a project at JUCO about 10 years ago. That was a capoeira demonstration, and I was asked to
Yes.
shoot video on that. And looking at it, I was like, then, are you sure this is a style of fighting? Because it looks like they're dancing and got music going and all that stuff. Whereas me, I came from karate. You don't get that. You really don't get dancing and karate and everything. So,
Yeah. About the closest you come to dancing is kata, but kata is very practical when you use it as a shadow boxing and learning your techniques. Because I studied Shotokan karate for quite some time, but I also trained in capoeira. Now capoeira is a different it's a different mindset because it was a different origin. Whereas you have your karate was in a very harsh time. Your modern karate is more, 150 years old, but it was rooted in Okinawan fighting because way back when, Japanese people weren't as polite as they are today. There was a lot of fighting going on.
yeah.
And everybody from the samurai down to the villagers had to learn how to fight. This but that is where the karate came from, is they had to use their empty hands against stronger fighters. And so that was that. But capoeira was something completely different. This was in the days of slavery. Slavery was all over the world. I mean, Europeans were taken as slaves into Africa, and then Africans were taken into the West as slaves. But would the history of slavery in Africa, the uh, East India Trading Company go way over to the Ashanti on the West Coast and say, "We've got gold. What have you got?" And they say, "Oh, we've got slaves." So slavery was sent over, and out of Angola, some of those were sent to Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
And in Brazil, they were forced to work in harsh conditions and this type of thing. Well, they wanted a way to fight back against their slave masters, but they couldn't practice fighting without getting caught. So they just disguised it. They played it as a game, but it was done to music like a dance.
Wow.
But they're actually practicing deadly kicks and all this stuff. But whenever the slave master saw them, they'd be like, "Yeah, they're letting loose. It makes them better workers." Okay, not even realizing that they were getting ready to kill their slave masters and their uprising. There actually was an uprising where a lot of these slaves beat their masters, and got free, and they formed these colombos, which are these communities of freed slaves. And so that was off of capoeira, and capoeira even though Brazil ended slavery in 1888, they were one of the last countries to do it. Capoeira was still illegal. It was still, the street mafia type of thing up until the 1930s with Minister Bemba, who went before the Sporting Council and got it to labeled as an official sport, which then legalized it. And so it's developed and spread since then. So it's not as much a practical martial art as it is a fun one. It's just so fun to do. It's a game, it's a dance, it's singing, it's clapping, So it gets you in shape, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, I brought up empty hand, which is literally what karate translates to. Brings to mind one as someone who studied Japanese, in part because of my studying karate. The word karaoke is the same kara as in karate. So
The empty, the karate means open or empty. Yeah. But and the thing is, I mentioned the old style versus the new style. The new style is like anywhere from 100 to 150 years old, depending on which style you do. Now, Shorin-ryu is like 1930s, whereas Shotokan is 1920s. Some before that. But these are the dos, as opposed to the jitsus. The jutsus versus the dos. The jitsu means the method, where do means the way.
Yep.
And so the big difference is nowadays it's more of a philosophical type of thing. You have your karate do, your judo, your aikido. Even in the Korean has picked that up with taekwondo, the way of the foot and the fist, and tang soo do and hapkido and things like that. Whereas the jitsus were more practical. It was the hard fighting. That's your jujitsu. That's your ninjutsu. That's your aiki jujitsu, which aikido was formed from. So they're you got to make that distinction on the dos, because I mean it's two different philosophies, even though they're integrated martial arts.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. That's pretty cool. And I didn't really stop to think about that, but yeah, that's pretty awesome to learn.
Yeah, because when it comes down to it, martial arts, any fighting is punch, kick, grapple, wrestle.
Yep.
Those make up everything. And you get to something like Aikido was formed from Aiki Jiu-Jitsu. Aiki Jiu-Jitsu is brutal. It is it is super brutal. But Aikido was made to be a gentle way of practicing martial arts from a spiritual and fitness standpoint without being violent. And so they use the grappling, the throws, this type of thing. But in order to make it practical, you got to go back to the Aiki Jiu-Jitsu with the punching and the kicking and all that.
That's true. And for anyone who's never seen Aikido, I strongly suggest at least going to a demonstration once in your life, because it says some pretty cool stuff. Lots of falling and grappling, like these. I said, it is pretty cool.
Yeah, I did a demonstration one time. It was actually for a church message, believe it or not. He was talking about spiritual jiu-jitsu. And so a guy I know who in Goju-Ryu was, at the time, he was 9th degree black belt. He's now since become 10th degree top level. But he and I went up on stage and he did Aikido on me. So I was the throwing dummy. So my experience with Aikido, I've practiced some of the grappling and that type of thing, but my big really experience with Aikido was being beat up. Got that on stage.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, and yeah, you're right. There's a lot of philosophy that's behind all of it and everything. I would suggest Sun Tzu as a good starting points for anyone who's interested in getting into martial arts, period, whether it's Brazilian or Japanese or Chinese, Korean, whatever. Sun Tzu is a good place to start, I think.
Well, Sun Tzu is pretty brutal, but it's good form of kung fu. So it's if done properly, it's brutal. But yeah, it is a good if you want to get into the Chinese styles, into the wushu, Sun Tzu is a good way to get in because it's not as physically demanding up front. So,
and Jeet Kune Do, are you familiar with that one?
A bit, yes. That was actually primarily Bruce Lee, but others
Yeah.
like Dan Inosanto and others. In fact, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar even helped contribute to it because they were students of his and worked with him on it. But yeah, that was the all-encompassing.
Mhm.
It's you have your style, but it's more of a application type of thing because he used the Wing Chun, but other styles can be adapted with Jeet Kune Do. But Jeet Kune Do is more of a practical. It's a
Mhm.
practical application of style. So yeah,
And there's another
I'm
dough that
somewhat
we
familiar.
forgot about. Yeah, that's another dough. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The way, and a lot of them, and even though Jeet Kune Do is more of a jutsu type of philosophy, it was done in the modern day by a kung fu practitioner, and so yeah, he's going to go by the way. So
Oh, cool. Now, now bringing this back to film, has martial arts helped in your filmmaking or your acting?
well, when I first was starting out, well, I've done video stuff before. I wanted to be a filmmaker since I was a kid.
Mhm.
My dad was a professional photographer. Excuse me. He was a professional photographer and he got into videography that way. Me, I wanted to be a filmmaker
Mhm.
and I got into it that way. So we both had a similar interest. We set up video at church and all this stuff, but it wasn't until 2008 that I got involved with the IFC.
Mhm.
I went in to work behind the camera. I spend most of the time in front of it, though. One of the thing was I was training in not only martial arts but also in parkour. People were like, "Yes, we can throw you around and you'll enjoy it." Yeah, And so it took me a long time before I survived a role. They're like, "Hey, we killed someone. Call Dan." But so and that was kind of how I got involved in the acting to begin with. Now I tend to survive roles, but back then I had that unique um, thing about me where they can bring me in and I can do some stunt work or something like that, or do a death scene, whatever. And so that's kind of how I got into it, and then it just sort of snowballed from there. So it's a good way to start out.
I guess. And parkour, that's the jumping off buildings thing, right?
Well, parkour is just the idea is moving from point A to point B as quickly and efficiently as possible using only human body. Well, then off of that comes free riding, which is more expressive, more and that's when you see people doing the flips and all the stylistic jumping off of buildings type of thing. But you know, you got to be good to do that. And whenever you see those videos where they're just doing all this wild stuff, they're doing this a bit as a filmmaker. You do a bit at a time. You don't have all those cameras set up. You
No.
just have a single camera getting a shot, same camera getting this shot, and they do multiple takes, just like anything else, until they get it right to where it looks good. Because they're the first thing they're thinking about is safety above all. Now, you get injured just like any other thing. I was at a parkour jam and some security guy out on a Segway, came out and says what we were doing. And I said what we're doing. Says, is it dangerous? I'm like, well, one of the top things we worry about is safety. All the moves are designed to be, you know, safe, this type of thing first and foremost, and then practical on top of that. And right as I said that, one of our guys who is a parkour instructor went into a roll and did it wrong and got injured. he screwed up his he went straight down, screwed up his shoulder right as I was explaining how we focus on safety.
Oh man.
You talk about timing.
Yeah.
And you probably know Jake because he was one of the stunt guys with Dax and all. So yeah, but it was Jake that did it.
Wow. Fun times, fun times. Yeah, you could much get hurt in just about anything. Because I mean, left knee football. So tackling.
Yeah, I mean, any sport or physical activity can get injured.
Yep.
You know, and the thing is, parkour is actually a lot safer than most anything else because there's the focus on doing it right, doing it safe, doing it, you know, and there's technique to it. There's a particular technique, like when you see somebody drop down and then they roll out of it. What that is, if you ever see gymnastics do the floor routines and they do the flips across and then they flip up in the air and all that, what they're doing is they're building momentum and then they redirect that momentum vertically. This is just the opposite. When you have somebody do a drop, they go into a safety roll.
Mhm.
And what happens is when they take that vertical energy and redirect it sideways, then that roll where it goes to the shoulder to the opposite hip, not only do they come right up into a running position, but that roll dissipates that energy. And so, I mean, it's all these little detail things, you know, when you land, there's a certain technique, but I tell people as long as you can do it quietly. Because if you hear the impact, that's the energy being shot up through your knees, your hips, into your back, all that. But if it's quiet, you know, like ninja quiet, it
Yeah.
means you dissipated that energy properly, and it's a safer landing. So yeah, there's all these things about it that are just safety, safety, safety before you get into the wild, you know, the flips and the wall spins and all that stuff. So
Good deal. Good deal. Yep. And yeah, playing a ninja is cool. I did that with Tails. I played a ninja in a couple of my episodes, and yeah, that was fun. Wielding a ninja sword and yeah,
yep.
yeah, doing a little bit of fighting action. But yeah, I say safety first. You got to be careful not to accidentally slice one of your actors in half because it's a real sword. You know, that's literally you're holding a giant knife on you.
They can get those razor sharp. In fact, there were legend has it. I don't know how real it was, but legend has it that there were some samurai, even ninja, who would take a cloth, throw it up in the air, and slice it with a sword. And then they would look at it and look for phrase. If there were any phrase, they go back to sharp.
Yep.
Because I mean, it's supposed to just go straight through.
Yep.
Now, granted, you have two fulcrums. You have not only the swing, but also with the wrists to go through it, to give it any more power. But nonetheless, it's a sharp. They get that thing razor sharp so that it goes straight through. It's not medieval, you know, Scottish flame or something that's more blunt force.
Stuff we do today when we sharpen knives. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But it's like your sword fighting in the medieval Europe. Those were, although they were edged, they were more blunt force because they were nowhere near as sharp. Whereas the Japanese, they went razor sharp.
Absolutely. So, yep. Something else I was thinking about, switching topics a little bit here. I do recall we having a discussion at IFC one time about I'm talking about my female troubles, and then you said something. Well, you've had more success than I have with women.
Yeah.
Remember that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
well,
that's
you know what it's like having autism. You know the high functioning autism.
Yes.
But then when you have somebody like me who's not only personality type, Sigma, INTP with J, you know, Enneagram 4, Wing 5, you know, I've got that introverted nature. But at the same time, you know, you have the autism, but also ADHD and the anxiety on top of it. And it makes holding down a relationship almost impossible.
Yeah.
So and so it's one of those things I can't even do the dating thing, as you know. I've always wanted, be the husband, father, that type of thing, but I can't do the dating, and when it comes to kids, I like kids. I just don't like dealing with kids.
Yeah,
So
that's my job.
because
That's what I do with the
yeah,
chess club, dealing with other people's kids. Yeah, yeah,
well, it's not as much that, but it's my senses get overwhelmed, you
Mm,
know,
yeah,
and if I'm sitting watching a speaker and a baby cries, that speaker becomes background noise. ADHD is not good. Throw it in with the autism and the anxiety, it's horrible. And so you get these things where you're overwhelmed by certain things, but you can't really connect with people,
Mm.
and so doing the relationship thing just doesn't work for me
yeah,
as much as I would like it to.
and yeah, it's tough. It's tough. Like I think I told you. Yeah, uh, I'd be lucky to get a second date with someone. So yeah,
Yeah, I did 2 dates with somebody, and that didn't go anywhere.
yeah.
And that's about my entire dating life as an adult. That's so.
Sadly, the first girl I ever dated, I learned uh, passed away in December.
Ooh,
Yeah,
yeah.
and yeah, yeah, two women I've dated have been on the podcast. So,
It's always a good thing to do.
Mhm.
Hey, here's their follow up. Let's suck it in front of the world. Yeah.
And
But yeah, it's for those who can pull it off, great. I'm just not one who can pull it off.
yeah, uh, I keep I keep trying. I keep trying. That's all I can do. I can do. I
Yeah,
have
that's all you can do.
yeah, I have been involved in a, singles group lately, organizing board game nights and stuff, and uh, that's all. That's all in good fun and everything. Would I actually date these women? Probably not. But the important thing is I'm out there trying to work on the social skills and everything, and maybe, just maybe, gets to that point. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, you're absolutely right. It's tough being on the spectrum and all that good stuff. So,
It is. People don't realize how bad it is, and you throw in other neurological things like I say ADHD and that, and especially when they conflict. You have the autism, you got to have a structure and this type of thing, whereas the ADHD wants to be more impulsive, and they actually fight each other. You
right.
know, and I get the executive dysfunction where I can just be, I know what I want to write, working on a script or a proposal or whatever, and I'm just sitting. I know I've got it all in my head, but I'm just sitting there looking at a blank screen for 2 hours, and I cannot get my fingers to type. You know, and when I do, it's a huge chore. So I mean, it's the just the neurodiversity. When you're neurodiverse, it's a little bit difficult. That's all there is to it. And people who are neurotypical just don't understand. But then again, it's almost like if somebody's blind, how does a person who can see grasp how they live their lives? How if somebody's confined to a wheelchair, how do you grasp how they can get through their lives when you're so used to being able to walk?
Mhm.
So when you're neurotypical and not neurodiverse, it's hard to imagine what neurodiversity is like.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And we just have a couple more minutes left to go, so I guess we'll end on the geek culture side of things for a little bit, because I'm a massive Trekkie, and uh,
Yeah.
enjoying all the new stuff that's been coming out. And I don't know if you can see real well, but I've got Anson Mount's signature right there.
Nice.
Yeah. All I did
Yeah,
was
I haven't been able. I haven't been able to keep up on the new stuff on Trek. I'd like to go back and catch up, but I was
Yeah.
raised on Star Trek because my dad was a Trek, and he's keeping up on the new stuff. But I grew up also with Star Wars. In
Yeah,
fact,
yeah, Star Wars
that's
too.
what made me want to be a filmmaker, because I mean, it was just so epic. It was such a wonderful film, but at the same time, the first movie came out just before I turned 1 year old, but they had so with each of the movies, they had these things, not only books, but television specials on the making of it. And
Yep.
you could see the magic. And that's what it was. It was magic.
Yep.
I mean, this was not illusions, this was sorcery. But it's something I wanted to get my hands on and try it, and do this. And so Star Wars had a huge effect. Star Trek, superheroes, growing up with Super Friends and comic books, and so I mean later on, I mean right around like 2012, I got into Doctor Who. So I consider myself a newbie,
Cool.
of the full Who. So, I mean, yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
But Trek is always huge influence.
Yeah.
Huge influence on so many ways. I'm so big into science technology, and that really got me into it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I think it's a great way to leave things off. So thank you, Dan, for being on the podcasts. And
Absolutely, anytime.
yeah, and I will talk to you soon, probably at the next IFC meetings.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Take it easy.
This podcast is Uncalled For is hosted, produced and edited by Mike Chernevsky. Opening music is Cool Hard Facts by Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license. The outro music for all 2022 Virtual Fringe Festival episodes is Open Door by Little Glass Men, licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution license. Please like, share, and subscribe to the podcast through your favorite podcasting platform. Like our Facebook page at facebook.com/uncalledforpodcast, and check out our blog with show notes at uncalledfor.home.blog. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you next time.